Hello and welcome back to another video in the scene editor for Mount Blade Bannerlord. Today we're going to have a look at height maps and how you import them, and also material maps. Perhaps you are aware of height maps. They are black and white and they determine the height of the terrain, and material maps are basically how you would paint that terrain. So you could have an erosion layer, just to give a quick example. So you can either find a height map online, or you can create your own, which I recommend, and you can do that in different softwares. But I use World Machine, which is this one. You can get a free version, but when you have to export your height map, it will be low quality, and I don't think you can export material maps. So you would have to buy a license, and it can be a little expensive. But there are other softwares you can use, like KoA, which is also free, but you have the sort of same restrictions. But you can export better quality height maps. There is also programs like World Creator, but I'm not going to talk a lot about World Machine. I'm just going to show you this map that we will play around with today. And if you don't know how to use it, I will actually share this with you all, so you can just download it in the description and play around with it. There are some tutorials how to use World Machine, so you can do all sorts of crazy stuff. So just a quick view. Right now I have locked my preview to scene view, so we press F. So when we click on these different advanced Perlin, you can see that it has something to do with the height of the terrain and the hills and so forth. Then we combine it, and we have some curves and a river. So this is a Rohan river map, and it's actually going to be a forest. We have some erosion, flow structure related to the river and erosion, and then we have this custom macro, and the macro is basically painting the terrain. And we also have this standardized macro, which is in the program up here. And all these red nodes, I think they're called, are material maps. As you can see, they are now named. We have a height map, of course. So you just create your terrain over here, and this is the export. So feel free to play around with that. As I said, there will be a link in the description. So you export all your maps, and I would recommend you do it in 4K quality or higher if possible. It will take some time to do it. And here we have examples for this map. I don't think the normal map is exported. I don't use it. Alright, so this bitmap texture is actually not going to be needed. It's just a nice thing to have, so we can actually see what we have here. So we have the height map here. It can be a little hard to actually see that there are low points and high points, but there are. And you will be able to see this when we import it to the scene editor. So we also have flow maps, which is basically the river and the erosion and so forth. And we have grass maps and a cliff. And I will show you a quick technique how to flora your entire map within a few minutes. So these are the material maps and the height map that we will play around with today. So when we have our height map, and I recommend you also get material maps. It can be a little hard if you just find height maps online. but you can try. Perhaps there's a good website for that, but it's a little better to just use a program like World Machine, because you can change all sort of stuff on your map and make it look exactly like you want. Alright, so we go back to the scene editor, and we have to create a new terrain. Now I will decide the size of the map, and I like to use this setting. We have been experimenting a little on the team, and we have figured out that if you increase this to the next level, it will actually increase the file size by 4. So I recommend these settings. There is a little quality difference between these two, but it's very small, so I recommend this. So when you have decided the size of your new terrain, you just hit generate, and you can choose the base coloring, base texture for your map. I'll just use this. I think it's a decent base for a map. Right, we don't need this plane, so I'll just delete this. You can keep it if you want. I just don't think it's necessary. Alright, now we're going to import our height map first, and you can see the map is split up in nodes, and it's equal to our settings from before. So you hit Ctrl A and you have them all selected, and when you have done that, you just say import height map. So you find wherever you have saved your height maps, and just click on it. Now you can scale it up and down, and in some cases I would recommend to scale it up to make what were hills before look more like mountains. I don't think it's necessary in this map, but we will see. Alright, so we have imported our little map here. I think that looks interesting. I don't want the height difference to be too great here, because I actually want the cavalry to be able to cross this little river that's going to be here. So I think this is a decent height. If you don't like the height when you have imported your height map, then you just do it again with increased scale. Alright, now we go to material maps. First you have to go to your paint terrain layer, and you have to create some new layers. So first we create a layer, and I think we should start with the rocks. So just type rock, and I know these are not very good, so we scroll up to this one perhaps, or this one. Let's try this one. I think that's a pretty nice texture. Alright, remember that we have this selected, so when we import our material map, it will actually use this texture, and you can't do it for the first layer. Beware of that. So when we have added our layer, just go back and you Ctrl A again, import material map, and again you just find wherever you have saved all your material maps. So we use the cliff material map here, and we can actually see the texture used here. We can always change it later and add parallax and so forth. So we just create another layer, and we will just create a ton of them. So how about we find a nice grass layer, this one. Alright, And we just do the same again. So we have 2 grass maps. Let's try something like that. I think that looks pretty cool. So let's try and move on to the next layer. Now I'm gonna choose the same texture as before, but this time I will actually make it a little darker, and it will blend really well, and you can still see that there's a difference, even though it's a minor one. And you can see that it's actually a little darker now. One thing you will notice is that the base texture is still used for our river. Let's move on to the next one. Now we will have to choose something for our flow map. And I think we have a pretty good texture here. Let's do something like that. You select the flow map. Interesting. Very interesting. Alright, so this can happen, and when it does, you just try and figure out the right order. Perhaps it's not very needed, this layer. I think it makes the map looks more brown. I don't really mind that, but we can always just increase the smooth blend so it's not that noticeable. Something like this. I think we should choose this mod. Can actually see the difference, but I guess it's applied. Alright, so when you have imported all your material maps, and it can be a little hard to actually figure out where it colors, and perhaps you have to move around your imports, so just turn them all off, and one by one try and get a look at what it does. So for this one, the last layer we added, we have the, can be a little hard to actually see where it paints, but we can see that it sort of paints around the river, or at least close to it, so I think that's fine. So we just go to the next layer, turn it off, and you can see that it is grass. On the next one, you can see that it is actually painting towards the river here. So we could change the texture if we wanted. It depends on your map. This could be earth instead if we wanted that. I actually do like that it is grass. Maybe that should be the one that is darker though, so perhaps we should turn this off, and perhaps this one should be the darker one, something like that. We can always change it later. Right, we move on to the next layer. So here we have some more. Yes, looks pretty interesting. Alright, and here we have our cliff. I think that looks pretty decent, no problem there. Alright, and you might want to color your entire terrain except for where you have a cliff. So I will show you how you can do that now, because that's a pretty good idea. Alright, so you have your cliff material map. You just make a copy of it and you open it up in whatever program you have. I use GIMP. You can use paint.net as well, or Photoshop, or whatever program you're used to. So right now you can see all the white is actually where it will paint the rock, and we want it everywhere else than there. So just go up to colors, and it will be different if you use a different program, of course, but you can select invert in GIMP, and now you have the opposite of where the rock texture will be. So we just select save. It's very important that it's a PNG file, and that's it. Now you have a new material map, and it's the opposite of cliffs. So let's go back and try and import it to our map here. So we add a new layer and move that layer as the second layer. You could have it after the rock layer, but we will try it here first. So we decide a texture to use, and I think we should try the dry grass. Why not? Let's try that, and it's selected, as you can see. Alright, and now we actually have all that. Of course, you can see that the problem now is that our river here is actually textured like that. So we could choose a different texture that would blend better in with that. I'm not sure it's a problem for these places. Alright, let's try and see if we can find a better texture. Alright. I think we should try and make it blend in better with the grass. So we just find the same texture we used, and I think it's additive in this case, and you can see that it is sort of getting closer. Now we actually made this layer a little darker. Alright, let's try and see if we can find a way to make this look better. We will change the base layer here because it's going to be hidden. There we go. And make sure it's the same as the terrain. And we will use parallax. And I think we should choose, I think 400 is good. But we will see. This is still turned off. So I think we should try and use this for the river. Alright. That looks a little extreme, so maybe 200 was enough. Yeah, I guess it is. Perhaps a little less actually. Hmm. 120 looks pretty decent, I would say. Alright. Let's try and turn it on again. Alright, so we have this texture from before that we want to change. So, like before, I think we should try and swap around here. So we remove that. And we found the ground grass. Let's try and make this like that. And we have a layer Yes, this one. I think this should be the grass with rocks from before. So I think this could be a good texture to use, because you can use the parallax and make the rocks look a little more bumpy and so forth. I think this is beginning to look pretty nice. Perhaps we should try and make it blend better in with the other grass layer. So let's try and do that. Alright, so it's just like before. You find your texture, this one, additive, and you can actually see that it is blending pretty smoothly. I think that's good. Alright, and you will notice this a lot right now, but I wouldn't say it's a problem. Alright, so we go back to this layer, and you can see that is coloring our riverbed here, and we don't want that. So you will have to figure out what the height for your river is. So I think we should try and take this height, go into the terrain elevation and see. Alright, height here. So we will have to figure out the exact height we want for this river. I think that's interesting, somewhat, this amount. Perhaps we should just increase it just slightly. Let's try that. Alright, so perhaps it was accurate before when it said around 6 here. So let's try and use that setting, and we will have to choose erase because we want it removed, and you will have to use the height filter. So something like that, and we can always do a test first. Oh, I think the distance tools. Yeah, alright. My mistake. Alright, so you can see it actually brings forth our gravel texture here, wherever it is now. I think that's pretty cool. And it's only down here where it's actually going to be useful. So we just remove the grass, you can sort of see it disappears here. And we do it around our river here. Now we have done that, and let's try and lower the water level again. Can be a little tricky to find the exact level of water you want for your map. I think this looks pretty good, to be honest. So now we have textured all this, and we are actually pretty close to have a good base for our map here. So for the layer that is opposite of the cliffs, we will have to use flora, and it's really useful. So you just find a good grass flora. This one is pretty good. And we have to select a low colony radius, I would say 3, and increase this to, what should we say, 66. And now we actually got grass everywhere else than the rock, and it I think it looks pretty good. I like it, at least. And of course you can just for the sake of it, let's try and add another one. And there's this one, almost the same name. Let's have it at 5 and perhaps 44 instead. So now we have a little more yellowish think that looks pretty good. You can always change the coloring of each one in the albedo multiplier, of course. I do that especially for seasons, but we will cover that in another video. Alright, so I think this looks pretty good, but perhaps we should try and make it look even better. So for this layer I think it looks pretty good, but maybe we could find something to make it look even better. So let's try and add a flora layer with rocks, and I just know this is a pretty good one. Let's try to do something like that, and 25 perhaps. You can sort of see the idea here that it's adding some rocks here and there. I'm not sure if it's enough. Maybe we should increase it to 32. You will just have to play around with it and see what you like. Personally, I think we should try and have the rocks larger. Something like that. I think that looks pretty good. If you want more, you can always do it manually with the paint flora and just add them here and there, wherever you think looks good. I think this is a decent one. Yeah, there are some rocks over here. I think that looks pretty good, to be honest. And if you want to apply a forest, as we are, I would suggest to add a new layer. You can use the ones we have already made, but I like to have my own layer and have a little more control where I place my trees. So we do something like that. We have forest, and perhaps we should start by having some shrub mix. So we have some bushes, and we have some, perhaps we should use the beach mix. Let's try something like that. Alright, so right now wherever I paint this, there could potentially be trees, and we have to disable the height filter, of course. Alright, so we got some bushes here. I think that's a good start. Like I said in the earlier video about flora painting, it will sort of change. Alright, so still no trees. Maybe we should increase the density. Alright, so we got some trees here. I think that looks pretty good actually. Perhaps we want some different types of trees as well, just to make it stand out a little more. I think they blend in better, to be honest. So let's try something like that. You can increase and decrease the height of the trees, of course, just like we did with the rocks before. Alright, there we have it. Now the edges of the map we want to make sure are pretty covered. And of course you can see that it's a little hard when there's flora on top, but you can see that the texture beneath is sort of hidden when you use this. But we could make it a little more transparent, so it's easier to see what's beneath as well. And yeah, you can try and color along the lines you can see to give the material maps a better look. So something like that. And you don't want it trees everywhere. You want some places where the armies can move around. I hope you learned something new. So thanks for watching, and remember to like and subscribe, and feel also free to share the video with other modders, you know, perhaps it's helpful for them.